Before we start diving into the story, please take a second to like this video and subscribe. It only takes a second, but it will help the channel grow. Thank you for your interest in our channel. I always believed our life was a fortress of routine and security until the day I realized that even the strongest walls can develop cracks. My marriage with Artyom had been built on the promise of a shared future. A snug apartment filled with familiar laughter, daily rituals that felt timeless, and a mutual trust that I once thought was invincible. But slowly, the mundane tick of everyday life began to dull the colors of our dreams, and without me even noticing, I found myself yearning for something I'd long buried. That fateful afternoon at the office, as I shuffled through a sea of paperwork and the relentless hum of computers, my gaze met Alina's across the crowded cafeteria. Her eyes, sharp, daring, and tender all at once, spoke of untold stories and hidden passions that ignited a spark in me, stirring up memories of lost ambitions and secret desires. Every word that passed between us during that unexpected lunch break felt charged with a raw, unfiltered honesty. Her soft laughter and the way her hand brushed mine as we reached for the same pen sent my heart racing in a way I never thought possible. I couldn't deny that her presence peeled away the layers of my carefully maintained composure, revealing vulnerabilities I had kept locked away for far too long. That brief encounter, as unplanned as it was electrifying, became the turning point. A moment when the lines between right and wrong blurred, and my soul whispered the promise of forbidden adventure. While I wrestled with the implications of that stolen glance, I also sensed that something had shifted irreversibly inside me, setting in motion a series of choices that would redefine my life. Every heartbeat throbbed with the awareness that I was stepping onto uncharted territory, leaving behind the safety of the familiar for a chance at experiencing a passion that felt as dangerous as it was exhilarating. In that instant, with the clamor of everyday work fading into the background, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning, I awoke with a lingering sense of anticipation and dread, a peculiar mix of hope and guilt that made the dawn feel both luminous and heavy. I couldn't shake the image of Alina's knowing smile or the unspoken promise that had passed between us. On my way to work, every step felt charged, as if I were straddling the line between my old self and an uncharted future. At the office, while I buried myself in routine tasks, my mind kept replaying that initial encounter. It was as though I was living in two realities at once, one foot still in the world of predictable comfort, the other stepping into a realm of untamed desire. Meanwhile, Artyom's behavior had grown increasingly enigmatic. His late returns and secretive phone calls had become the norm, and while I pretended to brush off my own inner turbulence, I couldn't help but notice the subtle change in him, a quiet tension that seemed to electrify his every movement. I started paying attention to the slight pauses before he answered his phone, and the furtive glances he cast toward his own reflection. There was a mystery in his eyes, a hidden narrative that he kept well concealed behind a mask of casual indifference. One evening, as I tidied the living room and tried to quell my restless thoughts, I overheard snippets of a conversation that weren't meant for my ears. Artyom's tone was soft and full of an unfamiliar warmth, speaking words of tenderness that felt so personal they sliced through the distance between us. My heart pounded as I realized that his secret wasn't just a fleeting distraction, it was an entire world he had built without me. I tried to focus on my work, yet every meeting, every quiet pause, only intensified my inner conflict. The city outside bustled with an energy that mirrored my own turbulent emotions, a reminder that life was moving forward relentlessly, regardless of the fractured intimacy unfolding in my own home. The vibrant pulse of urban life clashed with the stillness inside me, creating a surreal juxtaposition that made every moment feel like a scene from a movie. I began to document my thoughts in a worn leather notebook, scribbling down fragments of emotions, half-formed ideas of freedom, and the bittersweet taste of rebellion. In those stolen minutes, I could almost forget the confines of our arranged routines, feeling instead a raw, pulsing need to explore the uncharted parts of my soul. That day, as dusk crept over the skyline, I found myself glancing at the clock with mounting urgency. I longed to escape into the arms of a promise that defied my old certainties, a promise that Alina had ignited with a single look. With each tick of the clock, the line between what was safe and what was right blurred further, leaving me teetering on the edge of a decision that might shatter the life I once knew. In that quiet, impending darkness, I understood that nothing could ever be the same again, and the path I was about to embark on would force me to confront the deepest parts of who I really was. That evening, as dusk surrendered to a star-studded sky, I found myself anxiously anticipating the rendezvous with Alina. The air was crisp with possibility, and every step toward the dimly lit bar felt like a deliberate stride into the unknown. I arrived early, taking a seat in a secluded corner where the hum of quiet conversations mingled with the clink of glassware. My heart pounded as I rehearsed the words I'd say, but when Alina entered the room, all rehearsals evaporated into the charged atmosphere that immediately enveloped us. She was stunning in an understated way, a soft sweater that hinted at curves, eyes that shimmered with mischief and vulnerability alike, and a smile that promised secrets. Our eyes met from across the room, and in that instant, the familiar boundaries of my daily life dissolved into the smoky warmth of the bar. She slid into the seat opposite me with an effortless grace that sent shivers down my spine. There was no preamble, no need for cautious small talk. Our silence spoke volumes as we shared glances laden with unspoken desires. We spoke softly, voices blending with the low murmur of jazz in the background. Alina's words were both inviting and enigmatic, each sentence drawing me deeper into a realm where rules were irrelevant. She shared fragments of her past, a life filled with dreams that defied conventional expectations, a yearning to live fully even if it meant dancing on the edge of danger. I found myself opening up in return, confessing the dullness of my routine and the silent desperation that had crept into my heart. There was a palpable thrill in bearing parts of myself I'd long hidden from even my closest reflection. As the night deepened, so did our connection. Every laugh, every touch, was an act of rebellion against the monotonous safety of my married life. The air grew thick with a heady mix of excitement and uncertainty, and with each passing minute, the pull between us became irresistible. We eventually moved from the bar to a secluded alleyway nearby, the cool night air a stark contrast to the simmering heat between us. There, under the muted glow of a street lamp, we shared a passionate kiss, a collision of longing and liberation that left me both exhilarated and terrified. In that charged moment, all the questions and doubts that had plagued me seemed to vanish, replaced by an overwhelming sense of freedom. Yet as our embrace deepened, a nagging voice whispered that this exhilarating detour came at a high price. With every touch, every whispered word, I was carving a new path in my life. A path that promised uncharted emotions, but also risked shattering the fragile balance of everything I once held dear. I knew then that this was no fleeting fling. It was the start of a transformation I could no longer ignore. That week unfolded like a carefully concealed dance of secret rendezvous and hushed conversations. By day, I wore the mask of normalcy, while the undercurrents of deception stirred beneath every routine smile. One rainy afternoon, as the city streets shimmered with reflections of neon lights, I found myself on another clandestine mission with Alina. We slipped away from the office unnoticed, our whispered plans echoing off rain-slicked sidewalks. "Let's meet where the city feels alive, where shadows play and secrets aren't questioned," she murmured, her voice low and confident, as if every word dismantled the walls I'd built around my soul. I hesitated only for a moment before following her into the maze of winding back alleys and hidden corners of the city. Meanwhile, Artyom's double life was growing bolder. I caught fleeting glimpses of him, the way he would tense before taking a call, his eyes glinting with emotions he tried to suppress. One late evening, while I was returning home, I saw him slipping into an upscale cafe. Through the foggy window, I overheard fragments of a conversation laced with tender laughter and soft endearments. The voice on the other end belonged to Marina, a name that stirred a mixture of curiosity and dread inside me. I miss the simplicity of us, the moments before everything became complicated, Artyom had said, his tone oddly wistful. His words, though delivered in hushed tones, sent a shiver through me, a stark reminder that the bond we shared was crumbling under the weight of secrets. My own journey with Alina was evolving into a passionate rebellion against the confines of my ordinary life. Our meetings were charged with a daring intensity that left me trembling with anticipation and fear. At a quiet rooftop overlooking the city, we exchanged more than just stolen glances. "I want to feel every moment as if it's our last," she whispered, as the cool night air mingled with the heat of our desire. Every word she spoke was a defiant cry against the numbing predictability of my marriage, and with every touch, I felt an electric pulse that both exhilarated and terrified me. Yet the thrill of these secret meetings was tainted by the growing realization that our lives were on an irreversible collision course. Each clandestine encounter with Alina was a leap deeper into a labyrinth of emotions that I wasn't sure I could navigate. Simultaneously, the vivid images of Artyom's private moments with Marina haunted me, a constant reminder of the dual betrayals unfolding under one roof. As I lay awake in the quiet hours of the night, torn between the seduction of forbidden love and the guilt of shattered vows, I began to understand that the price of these secret escapades was not measured solely in stolen kisses, but in the slow disintegration of trust and the unraveling of a life I once knew. Days bled into one another, and I began to lose track of the person I once was. Every moment at home felt like a carefully rehearsed performance, smiles and small talk masking the torrent of inner conflict. Even as I sat through quiet dinners and half-hearted conversations with Artyom, my mind drifted to Alina and the wild freedom she promised. It wasn't merely the lure of a forbidden affair, it was the irresistible call of rediscovering parts of myself I had long abandoned. I started noticing the subtleties of our shared life that now stung with betrayal, Artyom's fleeting glances away from my eyes, the silence that hung between our words, and the ever-present heaviness in the air when we both tried to avoid discussing the growing distance. I remember one particularly stark evening when the sky was an inky black canvas and the only sound was the steady patter of rain against the window. I sat on the edge of our unmade bed, the remnants of a once cherished intimacy scattered like dust in the corners of the room. My thoughts churned with remorse and longing in equal measure. I questioned if the excitement of my secret meetings was worth the slow death of the life I'd known, if chasing a taste of passion might ultimately leave me with nothing but emptiness. The image of Alina, her eyes alight with the promise of a wild, untamed future, danced before me like a mirage. Each memory of our stolen moments clashed violently with the reality of the home I now inhabited, a place that seemed more like a museum of memories than a sanctuary. Across town, Artyom's world was unraveling in its own silent way. I caught him on more than one occasion, his face etched with a mixture of desire and regret as he conversed in hushed tones on his phone. His conversations with Marina carried an undercurrent of longing for something lost, an echo of a time when our lives were simpler before secrets found their way between us. Their clandestine meetings, like mine with Alina, had evolved into a labyrinth of desire and deception. It became painfully clear that while both of us were chasing our separate fantasies, we were slowly being pulled apart by the very things that once brought us together. In the midst of these conflicting emotions, I wrestled with a deep-seated need for escape. The life I had built with Artyom was crumbling under the weight of silent accusations and unspoken truths. Every day felt like a battle against the encroaching darkness, a test of whether love could endure in the aftermath of betrayal. I was caught between the desire to salvage what remained of our shared history and the overwhelming pull toward a future unbound by the past, a future that, with every stolen kiss and secret whisper, beckoned me closer to an uncertain destiny. In the dim light of a cold, unyielding dawn, I found myself wandering the empty streets, the echo of my footsteps mingling with the silent pulse of a city that never seemed to care about my inner turmoil. Every shadow whispered memories of what once was, a life filled with safe routines and promises made under the soft glow of evening lamps. Now, that life felt like a distant dream, shattered by the relentless pull of hidden desires and unspoken truths. I had reached a point where the collision between my inner cravings and the reality of my crumbling marriage was impossible to ignore. The painful clarity of betrayal had seeped into every corner of my existence, leaving me raw and exposed. That morning, while sitting on a weathered bench in a secluded park, I was startled by the sound of hesitant footsteps approaching. It was Alina, her eyes alight with a mixture of excitement and sorrow, carrying the weight of her own scars. "We need to talk," she said softly, as if every word was a confession. I nodded silently, and together we retreated into the quiet refuge of the park. Under the shelter of ancient trees, she unburdened herself with a trembling sincerity, revealing how the confines of a life dictated by society's expectations had choked her spirit. She spoke of a desperate need to feel alive, a raw, untamed desire that had drawn her to me as much as it had drawn me to her. Her words were like shards of glass, beautiful yet painfully sharp, each one cutting deeper into the layers of my carefully constructed facade. Meanwhile, back at home, the silence of our apartment was a haunting reminder of the man I once loved. Artyom had been absent for days now, his presence reduced to distant echoes and a trail of messages that betrayed his secret life with Marina. Late one night, I discovered a series of texts filled with confessions of loneliness and longing, each message a testament to a man torn between duty and the call of something more elusive. The realization that he too was unraveling hit me hard, a painful truth that we were both adrift, lost in the labyrinth of our own making. That evening, with the chill of autumn settling around me, I returned to the park where Alina and I had shared our confessions. We sat side by side on the same weathered bench, not touching but bound by a silence that spoke louder than any words. "Do you think we can ever go back to who we were?" I asked, my voice barely rising above a whisper. She gazed out into the dark horizon before answering, "Maybe not, but maybe, just maybe, we can build something new from the ashes of what we've lost." In that moment, her words ignited a fragile spark of hope inside me, a hope that even in the midst of betrayal and despair, we might find the strength to reshape our lives. It was a precarious promise, one that carried both the terror of the unknown and the allure of renewal, leaving me standing at the crossroads of past regrets and an uncertain, yet beckoning, future. The tension of secrets and half-truths had finally reached a fever pitch, and one chilly morning, the weight of our hidden lives compelled me to confront the reality I could no longer evade. I awoke before dawn, the quiet of the early hours enveloping me like a shroud, and I knew that today nothing would remain unsaid. Every fiber of my being was pulled in different directions, a wild, chaotic blend of anger, regret, and a strange, defiant hope that change was possible. At breakfast, the silence between Artyom and me was more deafening than any shouted argument. His eyes, usually so guarded, betrayed a flicker of anxiety as he hesitated before reaching for his cup. I sensed that beneath the surface, his inner torment was as vivid as my own, and for a moment, it felt as if our mutual betrayals had forged a mirror that reflected our shared pain. I tried to muster the courage to break the silence, to demand honesty from the man I had once believed in completely, but every word caught in my throat. Later that morning, I found myself drawn back to the park where the echoes of our confessions still lingered. Alina was already there, sitting on the familiar bench, her face illuminated by the gentle light of a rising sun. Her eyes met mine with a cautious intensity. "I've been thinking," she started, her voice trembling just a bit, "about everything, about us, about who we were, and what we might become if we dare to change." Her words, laden with both determination and despair, resonated deeply within me. It was as though, in that moment, she was not merely an accomplice in my betrayal, but a kindred spirit equally burdened by the consequences of our actions. We walked slowly along a winding path lined with dew-kissed grass, each step seeming to carry the weight of our choices. The park was almost empty, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for the storm to pass. Our conversation, raw and unfiltered, shifted from whispered confessions to practical reckonings. "Maybe it's time," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "to stop living in this endless cycle of secret meetings and stifled truths. I need to know what comes next, if we can rebuild something real from the fragments of our shattered selves." Alina paused, her eyes searching mine for sincerity. "But what if the truth is too heavy to bear?" she countered, her tone edged with both hope and resignation.